Greetings, one and all. Chris Courtney here, once again, new Pragmatic. It's the Friday before Thanksgiving. Under a week now until Turkey Day, and I get the sense that like the November grind is beginning to set in. Beginning of the week, lots of projects coming through. Now things are starting to slow down. Yeah. November, you push a lot in the month of November, and then suddenly you get to a point you're like, man, I'm just worn out. It's quite common. It's quite common for people. What I typically see is I see people able to push 3-4 weeks at a time, really hard, and then you gotta let off the gas, and I think we're getting to that point in the month where people are starting to let off the gas. That's okay. I'm here for you whenever you have projects for review, whenever you have projects that you'd like to that on the wrong screen. Hey, Chris Courtney. Anyway, let's back that up. It's feedback loop. It's time for the feedback loop. We do this every day, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. Central. Yeah, I'm in the Central Time Zone here, and got a project here from Rebecca. We had a lot of stuff come in yesterday afternoon into the feedback loop, and if you're not familiar with feedback loop, if you're just kind of trolling along and you trip across this, students here at New Pragmatic, they submit their work into Discord, and then we pull it out and we take a look at it. Had a few projects yesterday. One of those things that we did was we literally went through and we took a look at Tejel's case study for her Bergen prototype, and not prototype rather, her Bergen video project. And what was interesting about that was it gave us an opportunity to extract the text out of Figma and into a real editing software suite. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here so that we can take a look. If we go into Grammarly, this is really where, yes, that's fine, Grammarly's got to reload, it freaks out. This is really where I do all of my editing, and as you can see, there's quite a bit of work in here. I would say I use Grammarly nearly as much as I use Figma, and Grammarly always gives me this error saying it's got something to update. What you'll notice about Grammarly right away is that it's saying that I've got a number of errors, and some of these errors are legitimate, like that. I need to move the punctuation there, and that's fine. We'll go ahead and accept that. Hemingway, this is a quote, so I don't necessarily need that one, so I'm going to delete that away. Some of these alerts says to achieve, replace. We use stop motion compositions to achieve this from achieving. Don't need that. That's not really functioning. Let's go ahead and move that one as well. Ultimately, Grammarly, when we pulled everything out of Figma, we put it into Grammarly, it gave us like 120 alerts. These are the 18 alerts that we were just left with at the very end, and we were still working through them. But Grammarly does a great job of looking at all the different issues and giving you a heads up on really what needs to be adjusted. Figma's not going to do that. Neither a Sketch or InDesign or whatever design platform. When you're writing, you need to have a writing tool available to you. I use Grammarly. This is the Grammarly Pro Edition, so if you've used Grammarly before and it looks a little different, I do believe that Grammarly Pro is worth the money. So if you do a lot of writing, this is where I would suggest that you sync a little bit. Like if I was like, spend it on Adobe, spend it on Grammarly, and then go use Figma. The Figma platform is fantastic. But Figma doesn't cost you anything. eventually, people have asked me questions about that, and they say, well, if Figma doesn't cost anything, what's going to keep it from just like going away? And I'm like, well, when you get into industry, like companies pay for Figma because Figma streamlines their effectiveness because it's shared resources and whatnot amongst the teams. So Figma's doing fine. Figma's making their money from the Airbnbs and the Ubers. Put your money into Grammarly. I'm a big fan. Grammarly Grammarly gives you a score, and the score is related to the number of errors that it's finding. It's encouraging you to rewrite wordy sentences and whatnot. And in this particular case, Grammarly raised the score literally like 36 points. By the time we got to the end of it, it was It had moved from the 60s to the upper 90s. So anyway, I just want to reference that. If you find yourself writing in Figma, I understand it's sometimes tempting to just write in Figma. I even have exercises where I tell people, okay, for instance, if you're working on the priority guides chapter, I tell people, okay, go create a iPhone template and create a priority guide. And a priority guide's a little different. You're not writing really a narrative, but when you're creating a priority guide, when you're done with that, when you've gone through your 3 revisions, extract everything, throw it in the Figma or throw it in the Grammarly, and begin looking for issues. A lot of the issues that were in this were simply misspellings. They were not big problems. They were just misspellings, and misspellings that you weren't catching because Figma. You have to run a plugin in Figma, and luckily Figma does now have a spelling plugin, and it's a good one too. But Grammarly does a much better job of catching those issues. So, with that said, I just wanted to take us on that journey for a moment. Today, Rebecca has resubmitted her work for Feedback Loop, and she had one outstanding issue that was kind of hanging out there. That we've seen it for a couple of days, but we haven't addressed it because it's more of a tweak. It has to do with linear gradients, and not just creating a linear gradient, but creating a transparent linear gradient. And I wanted to spin up an example so that we could just look at just the code specific to a linear gradient, and we could play around with it for just a moment. What you'll see is in this example I have 2 gradients kind of overlapping one another, and I did that so that we could actually see the changes as they occur. In the background, just on the body tag, I've got a linear gradient, and this property is set to move from the right, so to right, from the left to the right. So if I switch this and I said the left, it flips. Okay, that's pretty clear. I'm going to switch it back to right, and you can see if you have that messed up at all, it's not going to work. So it breaks. Then we're using RGBA, and RGBA is red, green, blue, alpha, and the alpha channel gives you the opacity. So if I have a 1 here, that means that it's full opacity. Because I don't have anything in the background, I should just go ahead and have these all at 1, which means that I could ostensibly come through and say it's RGB, 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 which is ideal if you're not using opacity. It just runs a little faster. But here, I have a linear gradient on this div, and this div it's real simple. This says test box. And this background gradient is linear gradient to right, same direction, but now I'm using RGBA. And where I'm using RGBA, the transparency part, the ability to see through, comes when we readjust this last number that's specific to the opacity. So I'm just adjusting it, so this is now more of a green. If I say 3, 4, 2, 1, you can see that that opacity on this gradient going up and down specific to that point in the gradient. If I come down here, I'm going to change this to 255, 255, 255, and that makes it into basically white. If I change that to 0.4, we can now see the blue coming through the white. So this green down here has the black coming through, the white has the blue coming through, and then I've got a black at the right side of this gradient. And I'm going to switch that to 0.5, and you can see that get darker, but you can still get a hint of the blue through there, even though that is, in fact, black. This is how linear gradients work, and the RGBA tool is really how you get that transparency. This is important to Rebecca because as we look at her Octa case study, she has a transparency, a linear gradient transparency right here. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come through here, I'm going to switch this to RGB so I can see this. So 212 to 134. So 212 to 134. Let's change this to 212 to 134. There's your pink. And I'm going to go ahead and change this to like a heavy 0.9. All right, so we get the sense of what it is there. And it looks like this goes to two different ones. So this is now 237, 140. 237, 140. And I'm going to change this to 0.5. And, oh, no, well, no wonder that did that. I literally typed it into the same field, so I apologize about that. Let's change this one. 237, 140. I'll come back and do the other one as well. 212, 134. 212, 134. So here we have the gradient moving across. I'm going to delete this last one because this is just going into two of them. So yeah, it's going across. It's interesting to me, Rebecca, as we look at this, I don't really get a sense that there's a lot of difference in this color. I do get a sense that we definitely want like a gradient, but the color itself, it doesn't move a lot. So that's evident here as well. I mean, I guess it would be a little different if this came down. You might get a little more of a sense that it was changing. If it comes up, like the whole thing changes, and a lot of that is because of where your gradient is. Your gradient is like all the way over here to the side, which means that this number that comes into place, so there's like this 35% here, this is where that breakpoint is. So if I said 90, you see where this moves to. So now like the gradient is forced all the way over here to the right. If I said 60, that gradient is now spread out over a larger area. And if I said 40, now it's even further. It's really starting over here and then fading down. So this percentage is pretty important. It tells us where this is going to begin its transition. If we did the same thing for this element in the back, so if I said, now it makes it like a black line because these two things are right up against one another. If I said 10, it fades to 35%, and then it becomes the other. If I said this is 65, it's a lot more gradient So these are the controls that you have available to you when you're working with linear gradients. So what we're going to do now is we're going to apply that to the backdrop, so that we're basically doing the same thing that she was doing here. It's just going to be on her coded project. So I'm going to go ahead and go over to VS Code. I think yeah, there it is. It was just a little slow. Let's pull up her project, and always, whenever we're getting started, we want to make sure that there's nothing hanging out here, and there isn't. Now pull her changes in, get origin master. All right, so she's clearly went through. I see a lot of updates with regard to the company images, and this is important because yesterday, if you're watching along yesterday at all, the images, because the images weren't the same size, they were showing up in really different places. So that was an issue that we wanted to make sure was addressed for today. I'm going to go ahead and go live. This, being that this is just a straight up HTML and CSS project, we're just using go live out of VS Code, which is handy to have, frankly. I don't know if this is going to point to, yeah, it still goes to medium, which is fine. Nothing wrong there. Let's go with this. All right, so now we've got Silicandy. And the first thing we're going to really do is we're going to focus on this. And you can see there's a transparency here because I can see the image in the background. I want to scroll down just to see how the rest of this is coming together. It looks like that got broken yesterday somehow. We'll come back to that. Here's the customers. Here's the process. So, and then here are our stores. And our stores, they're well, image of Toys R Us logo. So something's broken there. And then obviously this is beginning to fall apart. So the first thing I want to do is I want to come up here to the Meet Silicandy, and let's fix that issue right away. So let's come back over here. Let's open the Silicandy HTML. This is where I typically want to come through and shut down this. Okay, here's the image, and she has something called pink back, and I'm pretty sure I created that style called pink back. So let's go ahead and find it over here in CSS. I bet it's in styles. I bet if I look for pink back, there it is. And currently has this RGB A on it, so that's where that opacity is coming from. I'm going to come back to CodePen, wherever I left CodePen at, and I'm literally going to wholesale just lift this code. I wrote it, so I can do that, and paste it in here. So here's the linear gradient. I'm going to save that. And what we should find when we come back in is that we now have a linear gradient on her project, and we do not. So the question is, why don't we? Let's go ahead and look at this. So it says linear gradient to background. Okay, right. It's because it says background color. Linear gradients want to be on a background image, if I remember correctly. And there we are. Now, you could say, Chris, why is it using background image instead of background color? I'm going to tell you because that's what the documentation says to do. I'm not going to tell you I understand why they wrote it that way. And I'm sure if you know somebody who if like Jen Simmons, I'd take that question to Jen Simmons. I'd say, Jen, why is it background image instead of background color? Because she's a genius, and she also is on the team that actually determines what the CSS actually is. She would be somebody that I would refer that question to. Don't go with a layperson like me. I just design the stuff. They create the tools over there. So with that said, you can see now we have a gradient here. It looks much closer to the actual Meet Silicandy, although this typography is different. And she's using Montserrat and extra bold, and I'm wondering what this is. So I just want to inspect it really fast. So is that Montserrat alternatives? It is. What is the weight? It says the weight is 600. I bet it needs to be like 900. So yeah, the difference there is significant. So perhaps worth fixing. But we'll come back to that. Not a huge deal at the moment, but it does feel uniquely different than that particular version. So she also has this my role label in here, and I think it's interesting to kind of dig in on that. We also have these buttons, and I know that you have a button style. Um, I'm not sure what's going in that text for button though. So I'll come back to that. I'm looking for yeah, the competition. What happened here? Let's take a look. So the H3, for some reason, this got kicked in, and I don't really know why. Is it because of this to call write was assigned to it? Kinda, but that silly contain okay. So we got rid of silly container. Now it lines up because silly container is already there. We don't need it here as well. I'm not sure really how that got put there, but I'm going to leave it alone. We do still need the individual company logos here. I am also going to leave that alone for the moment. It does appear one of the things that that Rebecca did yesterday was she put space between these, which is good. We definitely need some space, some other space though. And that space would be to the inside of these elements so that they move over just a bit. I'm going to come back because we've got other issues. So this is missing the extra space as well, which makes me wonder what we've done here to get that space. I'm just going to inspect the element. So we have, that's grid gap, that's the padding. Okay, so let's look at competition. Silly container, silly. So it looks like section silly has that. Okay, so maybe that's the trick. Literally section silly is just the how she's added the spacing. So if I come back and I say that gets us some space. The space is there. I don't necessarily know why this is still measured back in unless it was never, I never removed it from here. So we'll do that. The space becomes a bit much. This is where I might put it at the top and then remove it from the bottom so that as a new section comes in, it's not doubling up between the two. So let's go take a look at this, and we'll look for Scylla. I'm just going to take away the bottom version of that so that we get it off the top. We don't have it on the bottom. And then now we can just add it to the other. So we'll go down to customer. We'll go down to, and part of me is asking the question of, could I just put it on the Scylla container and simplify this a bit? That's but it's in grid. Okay, so here I'm going to say margin top for rim, and I'm gonna kill that style. Let's just kill Scylla. And now everything that has that space, that section container, Scylla container on it, should automatically be spaced out. We don't have to necessarily go through and add an additional class all the way down. It's just like we're leveraging what's already there. So that's helpful. Clearly, products does not have Scylla container on it, so let's go ahead and fix that. I'll just copy this. Let's go down to products. So here's products. Yeah, let's get rid of wide container, go with Scylla container. And this, again, we're designing to the file that Rebecca has provided. And Rebecca, if we go back to that Figma file, you'll notice it comes in. So this wide container was specifically related to like the nav, but then there was this internal version of it that wanted to be stepped in. So that's why we're using Scylla container. Now that we're looking at this, we need to begin to think about these numbers. I also want to look at the stores, because the stores should be relatively easy to space, and for whatever reason they're not at the moment. There's too much space between them, so this might involve us writing a little bit of extra code, because you know, I'm applying a style to them that may have some vertical spacing on it that isn't handy for our purpose here. So here we have grid gap. The grid gap isn't a problem. Let's look at full target logo. It's almost like there's a row size that's been crafted. So I'm going to take a second to just try to locate this issue. Okay, nothing there per se. That's really interesting. This almost makes me feel like I might be using the wrong tool. This says to call center, and I'm wondering what happens if I just take that off. Okay, so to call center appears to have some sort of issue relating to it, where it's trying to fill out the shape that's next to it, and I don't get that from here. Like, this just literally goes down and begins pushing, so that's good. I'm wondering if display flex won't help us here. So I'm just going to come in here to this, and I'm going to begin playing around here. Display flex. And you know, flex is, it's like, oh my god, you want to have all this stuff in here. It's like, well, yeah, but that's not exactly what I want to do. I believe that, like, let's go look at some Flexbox. Flexbox row. I think that is the, and we'll come to, we'll look up this row is so complete guide to Flexbox. Thank you so much. You know, let's go with flex wrap. So flex wrap. Let's put flex wrap on that, and well, I was writing it here. So wrap works, it pulls it back in, where no wrap does that. So we've got flex, we've got wrap. Let's come back and see what else we can do here for determining this 2-column design. Typically speaking, when I'm in Flexbox, I do like I basically say, all right, Flexbox, you're gonna, or CSS Grid, you're gonna be 2 columns, and that's just it. Align content, space between, obviously the issue here is that the images are larger, and one of the great things about CSS Grid applying that is that because the images are larger, I can use like image size 100% on them, and right now these all have full width on them. I'm curious, I want to remove full width from target just to see what I'm dealing with. Does it get smaller? And it does not. Full width is constraining it very nicely, actually. So I want to pull that full width back in, and we get back to this. I'm going to pull this 2-call off of it really quickly. It stacks. I'm going to create a new grid. I'm going to call this 2-call images. And 2-call images, it'll be over here in grid. I'm going to go to 2-call, because I kind of want to build it in a similar vein. 2-call, let's see here. Call images, and this is going to be 1FR. Save it, and it does the same thing, and it's equally spacing out, which leads me to believe that it's trying to line up with whatever is in the box next to it. I'll be able to identify this tendency if I simply come in and I'm just going to delete these. I'm just curious. And yeah, so it's trying to line up with what's across from it, which is unfortunate. I need to go in and sort out Flexbox, not Flexbox, but CSS Grid shrink. I'm probably using a Flexbox term. Auto sizing columns, auto fill to auto fit. And this looks also promising. It says preventing a CSS Grid blowout, which makes me believe, yeah. Okay, so that's max width. Okay, so these are columns. And Chris Coyer, I appreciate that effort. It wasn't exactly what we were looking for. Grid auto rows. So grid auto rows, this feels right. Let's use grid auto rows on this. If I said fit content, which felt like felt like I was seeing that in the doc. Min content. Min content. There we go. Okay. So min content was basically saying, at minimum, the height of this has to be set for the content. Without saying min content, it was just saying auto, not min auto content, but it was saying auto. And auto was basically saying fill up, make it level off with what's next to it. And a lot of times that's what we want to do, but that's not what we want to do here. Here we want to use min content, and min content takes the content size, the number of columns, the grid gap, and then says, all right, make it work. And that's what we get. We do have a broken Toys R Us image here, so I definitely want to fix that while we're here. Toys R Us. It says images, Toys R Us logo. So images. Images. Oh, yeah. So you have hyphens here. You don't have hyphens there. We'll save it. It will pop in. It did not pop in. Why didn't it pop in? Toys R Us dash logo dot PNG. Okay. Interesting. Images. Let's take a look at the logo. It's there, although you've got a little bit of weird cropping on it. That's not going to force it to fail on us, though. Is it a PNG? I'm not sure if it's a PNG or not. That's where my gut says might be an image with the PNG. I'm just going to put in Michael's here again. And nope. Okay. I've seen this happen before. We gotta shut live stream down. Live stream was not updating, and every once in a while it will freak out and do that, and it sucks. Let's come down. Come on. Let's see here. I'll shut that down. I'm going to shut this down as well. We'll start this back up. It's just not showing up. This is typically where I want to. It says could not load logo. Like, see, when you hover over, it should be able to load the logo just right there. And all the other ones, it's not having a problem with. So it said could not load image. I want to go look at that image because now that's really bugging me. Okay. Well, it's a PNG. I'm gonna alter this though. I'm just gonna say toy logo. And so now we've got toy logo. It's definitely not gonna load now. But if I change this to toy logo. Could have been a caching issue. Don't know. But let's go ahead and change that in your code editor. Toy logo. Seems silly, but there it be. All right. Those gremlins will drive you nuts. I tell you. So I love it that you're seeing it happen here because it does happen. Sometimes it's okay. Go rename the file, shut down the live server, restart it back up. If the code looks right and the image is what you said, like it's not a JPEG, it's PNG. Like if you've checked those things, it's still not showing up. That means it might be a refresh issue. So you gotta go down the tree of issues and then you'll get there. Let's fix this too while we're here, because contribution is designed another way in your version of it, Rebecca. If I come back over, yeah, contribution is supposed to be flipped. So let's do that really fast. It says to call right, and I don't necessarily think we need this div here either, because it's just applying itself to the image. But the image was on the left, not the right. So now if we save this and come back over, like we're looking for a design that looks like that, and that's pretty close to it. And now we've got, we've kind of cleaned up all of this. I still need the company logos here, Rebecca. Let's come on down. Now we're at products, and let's take a look at products really fast. God bless, scared the crap out of myself. My light, for some reason, moved, and I thought I was being attacked. That was not fun. That was not fun at all. Don't do that again. I must have shook something, or maybe the house moved. I'm not really sure. The office is moving, folks. Yeah, it's like, I don't know. The little bracket just like slipped and like the light suddenly fell. Earthquake. We'll just say it was an earthquake. All right. I'm awake again. Let's go ahead and hop into products. All right, so here we have we've got section gray back on these, and I'm fine with that. We need, this is where I think another two call. Let's just do two call images, because I do think that we want these things to not just stretch all the way down the page. But if I do two call images, this should just put all of our images into a two call design. Basically like this, okay, or pretty close to this. So let's see what we get. Boop. Okay, so love it when it does that. The trick though is right now, ooh, that's interesting. And we've got this extra image down here. Right now though, the products, like this is fine, but it's holding all the space to the right. It's holding all that space all the way down, when in your design, you want that to basically go all the way across and with images. So here's what I would do. I would end that section. I would end that section. Let's check your work here. Okay, now you can see like, oh, hey, look at that. It goes all the way down. But we have an issue, which is that we need the width that we have here to extend into the images. But if you remember, I just added this padding to the top. So when I add that width to these images, there's going to be a weird gray padding. Oops. There's going to be a weird gray padding to the top of this. So I gotta like edit it slightly differently. But I'm going to go ahead and put this in the Scylla container. And that will pull that width in, but it's going to give a weird padding to the top. And there it is, like right away. But our gray back is going edge to edge, which is nice. And essentially, you know, the issue here, we do need a little bit of space here, which, but I need to get rid of that. So rather than just get rid of that, I'm going to replicate. I'm going to call this images container. And images container is going to basically build off a Scylla container. To the point that what I'm going to say is I'll say Scylla container dot images container, and I'll save that. I'm going to rip the margin top off of this, and then I'll come down and put it just on Scylla container. So instead of, and you know, now it's just margin top is applied to Scylla container, but both Scylla container and images container have the same padding. Okay, so we come back, we save that, and what we should see is, yeah, so we've got the padding set as, you know, we don't have this ton of padding at the top, but the padding still applied to the other areas as we go down. So now Rebecca, the challenge is, okay, so what are we doing on the hovers? And that is something that I don't necessarily know how to guide you on this issue, because when we look at it, there's not a style dictated. So I need you to sort out what you're going to do on these hovers, because ultimately you need some information to tell you what these things are. You know, initially, or you can put a label below if you want to. That's fine, but you need something, because right now, if I could come back to the page, right now there's nothing down here. Also, I want to look at this because this is broken. You've got this long column of text here, so let's figure out why this image is down here. Scylla Candy. Yeah, it seems like this is just what I learned, and okay, so we got rid of that. Oh, let's see. You've got a section inside of a section. That's probably the main issue there, but you know, there's an extra div. Pull that over. You don't need that div because you just have this image here. So here's a section, and we need Scylla container here, and metric Scylla Candy. And let's look at this in the, like, okay, so it's flipped. All right, so it's flipped. So I'm just going to pull this over here. So this should be the small item. Small item, let's come back. And there it is. So essentially, this is now, it still needs a little bit of work. I need, like, the you had some styles up here for, you were styling up the the metrics that were pulled through. You need some spacing over here. We fixed that. We've got this, but I need a hover style. I need you to do something with this to push it forward. You've got what I learned, and you've got your bottom bar. I mean, we need these images. We've got the gradient on it now. Like overall, like your case study's here. Like we've fixed so many things over the course of the last couple of sessions, but we're still missing a couple of components. So I'm gonna push those changes up. I like to do that while we're here because I often just forget. So I'll say git status, git add, git commit, feedback loop updates, git push origin master, origin mater, and go. All right, Light, you stay right there. Don't freak me out again. Yeah, that's it. So I think without further ado, Chris Courtney, New Pragmatic. The Friday feedback loop is done. Remember, like I was talking about with Tejal's product or project, when you're writing case studies, try to write them somewhere other than like a Figma or an InDesign or a Sketch. Like write your work in an actual editor so you can edit it. And Grammarly, Hemingway app is also really good. Anything that's going to leverage AI, which is what Grammarly is leveraging a very basic AI to kind of read through and give you suggestions. You need that extra set of eyes, and sometimes it's going to be a bot. The bot isn't going to write it for you, but it's going to make some really good suggestions. And there are going to be times where the bot says something stupid, just like the bot doesn't understand the industry that you're writing for. I've seen it many times try to tell me, wireframes, do you need picture frames? Like, no, I do not mean picture frames. So, bots are like computers. They'll do exactly what you tell them to do, but they are dense. They're not very smart. So with that said, leverage these things. They're out there. You should be using them. They're going to make sure that you don't have obvious errors. Effect versus affect. They'll be able to help you sort things like that out. If you're terrible with using contractions, you don't know when to use UR for your instead of your, as in yours, the belonging to you, possessive. If you don't know when to use those things, Grammarly is great for that. On the flip side, we looked at gradients and how to create transparent gradients. There's all sorts of ways. The world used to be really flat, and not as in the planet used to be flat, and not a flat earther, but we went from very skeuomorphic, like green felt on the iPhone and wood paneling on the books app, very Steve Jobs era, to very flat Microsoft Metro design, and now gradients and shadow and things are coming back into play. Knowing how to do that in CSS is very important, but it's also very important to know just, hey, when can I use grid, and how do I use grid to like really quickly snap together a layout? And that's what we were doing with Rebecca's project in many cases throughout the last couple of sessions. So, I'm out of gas. Chris Courtney feedback loop. I will see you again for the shortened week on Monday. Take care.